Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're tuning into this episode. We are a viewer and listener supported podcast, so we really appreciate you listening, watching on YouTube. We really encourage you to subscribe to whatever platform you're using. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or if you're on Apple or however you listen to a podcast, be sure and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. Also, make comments if you like it and share it if you like it. We really need people to make comments and share the episodes that you like. And then also, if you're not already a supporter, we really would encourage you to go to spiritualityadventures.com and you can pick a tier, and we have bonus content for every type of giver. This is a nonprofit, so they're tax-deductible donations, but we do provide bonus content for those who are supporters. So be a part of the team, help support Spirituality Adventures, and we're so glad you're tuning into this episode. Well, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. Glad you're here. Thanks for tuning into this episode. I am delighted to have Andrea Martinez back with us. She came on about 4 years ago, honestly, one of my earliest guests, because I was just starting the podcast out about 4 years ago. And she is an immigration lawyer, and she was featured in the documentary that came out on Netflix several years ago called Living Undocumented, that was produced by Selena Gomez.
That's right.
There were like maybe 6 stories in that. Is that right?
That's right.
And you were one of the featured stories with one of your clients.
Correct.
So, Andrea has a long history in law, particularly as it relates to immigration. Her law firm is Martinez Immigration Law Firm. All right? So, Andrea, welcome back to Spirituality Adventures.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. With the craziness of what's going on in America right now as it relates to immigration, I wanted to have you on, right? So we've been trying to do this for a couple of months now, and we finally connected ourselves and our schedules and all that. But let's first, why don't you give just a quick background of yourself and how you got into immigration law? Okay. What drew you into that? And then give us a little backdrop about the Living Undocumented and why you were featured in that. Then I want to talk a little bit about some of the history of immigration law in America, bring people up into the present situation and what's going on today in America. And we have an audience that's both Democrat and Republican, but a lot of the things that I've been sharing here lately has been, let's just say, examining current practices in America under the light of, obviously, I always think about Jesus and things that Jesus taught and that kind of thing. So we might mention some of those things too. But let's first start out with give us a brief overview of how you got into immigration law, and particularly then leading up into this Living Undocumented that you were featured in.
So I was born and raised in Kansas City. My parents are travel agents, and I got the privilege of traveling the world from a very young age. So we went to the Amazon River on a cruise once. I fell in love with the people from Latin America, from Brazil in particular, and I just saw the smiles on their faces. And I saw that they seemed to have something that my people didn't, and it just really attracted me to people of the world. From, I think I was 12 at the time of that trip, maybe 11, 12, and I fell in love with global cultures. So then I graduated high school from Platte County High School in Missouri, went to college at a Christian college, John Brown University, and thought I was going to be a missionary. That's what I really thought God was calling me to. And when I was at John Brown University during a chapel service, there was a group of human rights lawyers that came and spoke my junior year. They spoke about injustices in the world, and they talked about how they were righting those injustices, and they were Christians. And I thought, that's what I'm called to. I really believed.
Remind me of the name of that group.
International Justice Mission.
Yeah, and who was the founder of that?
Gary Haugen.
Haugen, yes.
So Gary Haugen, who founded International Justice Mission, had sent a group of lawyers and speakers to our college campus to tell us about injustices in the world, like human trafficking, sex trafficking, slavery. I had never heard about any of that. My travels, I knew there was poverty, but I didn't know there was injustice. So I didn't understand the difference until I was in college at that chapel service, and I really felt called by God to go to law school. And I did. I applied to go to law school, really changed the trajectory of my life because I thought I was going to be an international missionary. But I knew that I felt called by God to go advocate for the voiceless. So I went to law school, graduated from American University's Washington College of Law in 2007, and then went to work for International Justice Mission in Guatemala. We were prosecuting child sex offenders, and it was an amazing year in Guatemala. I am fluent in Spanish and got more fluent at that time. But it was an experience that changed my life. I just realized that I couldn't live there permanently because I was a lawyer in the U.S. So then I came back to the U.S., clerked for a federal judge in Washington, D.C., and was asking myself, what kind of law can I practice in the U.S. with my U.S. law license that would allow me to advocate for the oppressed and the vulnerable? And at that same time, I was marrying my boyfriend, Jorge, who I had originally met at John Brown University and reconnected with when I was in Guatemala. He's from Honduras, but they're neighboring countries. We reconnected, ended up getting engaged while I was in Guatemala, and got married when I came back to the U.S. And doing his paperwork to get him a green card turned out to be a very, very complicated thing. Even though I had gone to law school, I had taken multiple immigration law classes in law school, I still messed up his paperwork. And he was not happy about it. I did it on my own, and I learned a valuable lesson about the complexities of immigration law. And then I thought to myself, well, I want to be a human rights lawyer. I speak Spanish. Immigrants are humans. I'll be an immigration lawyer. And that was basically the extent of it. So as I was clerking for this federal judge, I started looking for immigration law jobs that I could do after my clerkship. So I began working in 2010 for an immigration law firm, and then started my own practice back in Kansas City. We moved back, my husband and I, to have kids closer to my family. And then in 2016, right before the presidential elections, I opened Martinez Immigration Law, and the rest is history. I still obviously work at my firm, and we advocate for immigrants. We defend immigrants in deportation proceedings. It's called removal proceedings. We help immigrant victims of human trafficking and crime. And we help families, like the way I petitioned for my husband. We help couples that are getting married that want to get a green card for their foreign national spouse, things like that. So we do all kinds of immigration law, and I love it. I love what I do. I believe it's a calling, and I really do believe that immigrants' rights are human rights, and that I'm doing a type of human rights law that you can do inside the U.S.
Yes, yes. And I'm just going to mention this right now, but I think a lot of people don't understand, like the Torah is the first 5 books of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. And my Jewish friends call that book the Torah. Christians call it the Pentateuch. There's 613 commands in the Torah. That is where God, in the scripture gives a imperative, a command, like love God, love your neighbor. Those would be 2, right? But the most frequent command in the Torah, 36 times, is love the stranger, or it can be translated foreigner or immigrant. But when you study that word in the Hebrew, it is immigrants and refugees, people who are displaced for various reasons from their homeland, okay? And then Jesus picked that up in the great parable of the sheep and the goats, and basically talked about the stranger right there being how the sheep live in caring for the least of these, or the most vulnerable, just like you've said you felt like a calling to. So you felt a calling from God with a very strong biblical base. And Jesus picked up on those commands in the Torah and taught those as well. We are to love the immigrant. And the reason why? Because you were an immigrant. Abraham was an immigrant. Joseph was an immigrant. Moses' people were enslaved, and he led slaves out, and then they were immigrants. So because you're an immigrant, you're to love immigrants. Anyway.
And I always think about Jesus, even in his earliest years, when God actually called Joseph and Mary to flee to Egypt because Herod was killing all the babies. Jesus himself was a refugee.
There you go.
So when God calls, God can call even our Savior to be a refugee. And I wonder how the people in Egypt treated Joseph and Mary, and I just hope that I'm treating my clients the way that I hope that Jesus and his family was treated when they were in Egypt.
Beautiful, beautiful. So tell us, you ended up as a story in this Living Undocumented Netflix series that Selena Gomez produced. How did that happen? And give us a quick overview of that, and then we're going to dive into some history in immigration law.
So in 2018, many people will remember the U.S. government started separating children from their parents, immigrant children from their parents at the border. And the media picked up on it, and there were horrific stories of these children, even breastfeeding age, being taken from their parents, put in jails for kids. And I happened to have that situation fall at our firm's doorstep, basically. There was a family, an immigrant family, that was driving from Texas to Iowa. It was a mother and her boyfriend. The mother is Kenya, the boyfriend Luis. Luis was driving the car. Kenya was in the passenger seat asleep. Kenya was pregnant. In the back seat was Kenya's son from a different relationship. His name's Noah. And Luis had crossed the yellow line a little bit as he was driving, and the Missouri State Highway Patrol happened to pull them over and detained Kenya, not Luis, during that traffic stop. They took her, they put her in jail, and then they left Noah with his mother's boyfriend at the time, Luis, while pregnant Kenya was put in jail at the Platte County Detention Center, just 15 minutes from my office. And my law partner, Megan, got an email saying that there was this pregnant woman detained, which was also unheard of at the time. ICE was not detaining pregnant women until right about then. And some of our colleagues were asking for help. And they said, can anyone go visit this woman and see what happened? She was separated from her son, who they left in the car, and they took her and not her son. She's pregnant. And so my law partner, I had actually just been speaking at a Christian youth conference the week prior about Jesus' parable of the sheep and the goats. And there's another part where Jesus says, I was in prison and you visited me. And Megan came into my office and she said, I got this email about this pregnant woman who's in jail. And I can't go to sleep at night. I can't help but think about Jesus saying, I was in prison and you visited me. And I feel like we need to go visit this woman in prison. And so I said, of course, yes, let's go. And Megan and I went up there and we visited Kenya. And we see her big belly at the Platte County Detention Center with her white and orange horizontal striped outfit that they give them. And Kenya was miserable, desperate, had no criminal history, but was taken by the ICE agents after that routine traffic stop with no criminal history just because of her immigration status. We began to represent Kenya and working with the press and the media to tell the world what ICE was doing to this family. The Kansas City Star picked up the story and wrote an article about Kenya and Noah and their separation and her detention as a pregnant woman. And little did we know that back in LA, there was a group of producers that were in the process of looking for stories to feature in a docuseries about immigration. We got an email from those producers saying that they would like to come film. And I had, a year prior, had a different set of producers say that they wanted to come film, and then nothing happened. And I was like, well, sure, we'll see if anything comes of this. But the clients, Luis and Kenya, were willing to have their story told. And we told the producers, yes, you can come film. The clients have given permission for you to share their story. And little did we know who the executive producer was behind this series. So it was Selena Gomez who was funding it, and it was her passion project to share these stories. So that's how the story started, and we were filmed for months as Netflix ultimately was the one that produced the story, and it became a huge international phenomenon, as many people who saw the documentary saw, because while we were reuniting Noah with his mother at the Kansas City ICE office, two of the ICE agents actually threw my law partner and I out of the building that they had just invited us into, and they threw me to the ground, ended up breaking my foot, had a concussion, and then they detained me after they told us we couldn't come in, and they said that only I could come in, and they detained me in a room and took my phone and locked me in and wouldn't let me leave. So I ended up in a 5-year lawsuit. The ACLU represented me, and we just settled that lawsuit a couple years ago.
And when that documentary came out, I remember you were a little bit concerned about the attention your law firm might get.
It was crazy. Law school does not prepare you
right
for that.
Oh.
There's no amount of, I did, thank God though. It's amazing. I got a broadcasting degree also when I was at John Brown University. And I never thought that I would use it. And then here, it came in really handy because we ended up having to do an entire press conference and international press and national press. And it was overwhelming. And especially the days that followed what we refer to as the ICE assault, it was crazy because ICE detained Luis, put him in the deportation process, deported Kenya and Noah, and then we ended up representing Luis later in that series.
And tell us, while we're on that story, tell us where that's at right now. And even go ahead and plug the GoFundMe thing too.
Okay. So Luis was originally detained by ICE in 2018. ICE told us they were not going to detain him. He was just with the boy, bringing the boy to be reunited with his mom. And then after the ICE agents threw us out of the building and broke my foot, they took Luis and Noah in the building and then detained Luis and put him in the deportation process. In January of 2025, after representing him in immigration court for, what would that be, 6-7 years, we were finally able to get his case dismissed in early January 2025. So he was out of removal proceedings. And we were celebrating that victory because it was a long road representing him and finally getting his case dismissed before the immigration court. So ICE was no longer in the process of trying to deport him. And then in June of 2025, July 2025, ICE was waiting for him, leaving his home, driving to work, and re-detained him just recently, and he is currently in jail. Kenya is now pregnant again. And so it feels like living undocumented 2 happening before our eyes. And we have a bond hearing that we are hoping and praying that the judge will grant him bond. But ICE is currently saying that no one gets bond. Before, in 2018, when we represented him, he was able to get a bond, get out of jail, and we fought his case with him not being in jail. And now ICE is saying that any immigrant who is detained at any time, who entered without inspection, or who has some other sets of factors, are not eligible for bond. And the immigration judges are basically bowing, most of them, to what ICE has said, and only a few of the judges are staying strong. We're praying that Luis's judge is going to do the right thing and issue him a bond at the date of his hearing. But that's next week, and we don't know.
Okay. This episode will come out after that hearing. Okay. So, but I'm assuming you've got a GoFundMe page.
We do.
To help him out, right?
We do, to help out his wife.
And that'll be ongoing, whether...
Perfect.
Is that right?
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah, we can put that in the show notes is what I'm...
That would be great.
Yeah, put that in, yeah. So,
that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, so I love the work that you do. I think I'm one of your biggest fans, anyway. But I'm sure you got a lot more than me, but thanks for all that work, and I love it. Let's talk a little bit about immigration in America, a little bit about the history of immigration in America, but pretty quickly move into the current circumstances and what's happening right now. But I read a regular blog every day by Heather Cox Richardson. She's an American historian. And I would recommend all of America to read her every day. She's amazing. But she did one on the history of immigration law in America. And I sent you that. I think you read it, thought it was pretty good, and you had one big thing that you felt like maybe she could have included that was left out. But I first wanted to, and I'm just going to read a couple of things here and let you kind of make comment on it. But the first thing that she mentioned was that, and this came out just a few weeks ago, The polls show that 85% of American adults want laws to allow immigrants who were brought to the U.S. illegally as children the chance to become U.S. citizens if they meet certain requirements over a period of time. 85%.
Okay.
78% of American adults want the law to allow immigrants living in the U.S. illegally the chance to become U.S. citizens if they meet certain requirements over a period of time. Only 38% want the government to deport all immigrants who are living in the United States illegally back to their home countries. I thought that was, you don't hear that on Fox News or other or certain news sources. But it's interesting. Most Americans have a heart to care for illegal immigrants. We did a bonus section with Andrea, and I asked her, "Do you believe in aliens?" And she said no because
I don't like the word.
she doesn't like the word. So that was an inside joke if you're listening. But yeah, so undocumented immigrants, there's actually a pretty big heart for most of Americans to want those who aren't criminals to have a pathway to citizenship if they're living here under certain circumstances. There's a big compassion, but we're seeming to be losing perspective on that right now.
I agree with you, though, that there does seem to be compassion from even people on the right. My kids go to a Christian school that is very, very right-leaning, and many of my friends, I think probably most of the people that went to that school, that go to that school, voted for Trump. And when I tell them what's happening to my clients, they sound appalled, genuinely shocked. I personally don't know how you could be shocked when that was part of the campaign promise, right? He's doing exactly what he said he was going to do on the campaign trail. But it is appalling to most people that that non-criminal immigrants, people without criminal history, are being swept up in this. I think if there's any grace I can give to people who voted for Trump on this issue, they really believed, from what I am hearing, that he was going to be deporting, quote, the criminals. In their minds, that meant people with criminal history, people with felonies, somebody that's really dangerous. And I think the way Trump defines criminal is anyone who entered the country at any time without inspection. So a minor misdemeanor traffic infraction versus a felony. So I think it's how you define criminal.
Aren't some people even saying that if you're here undocumented, you're a criminal?
That's right. And so it's how you define criminal. So
Yeah.
I speed. I've gotten traffic tickets before, and I am guilty of those same levels of infraction. So these are civil violations. Immigration violations are civil violations. They are not felonies. There are a couple exceptions to that I'm not going to go into, but as a general rule, entering the United States without inspection is a civil, at the most a misdemeanor, is not a felony level convictable offense.
Yeah. So with that statement, let's go back in history a little bit now on this undocumented thing. From 1848, when the current border was defined between Texas and, the southern border, that was defined in 1848. Up until the 1930s, people moved back and forth across it. It was an open border. Okay, laborers came into America undocumented to work the mostly agricultural fields, right? Because we needed them and wanted them, and they came and worked, and then they went back. This was happened for over 50 years in America in our early history, right after the borders were defined. Okay, I think a lot of people don't realize that throughout our history, since we defined the southern border, that there have been periods where we actually wanted undocumented people to come into the United States and work our fields and work it because we needed it. We didn't have enough workers here to do it.
That's right.
What, in your history of immigration law, that's pretty accurate, right?
Absolutely. It's still accurate today. So it's the same demand then that we have now for workers, and there's always a demand for hard workers to do the jobs that the native-born people don't want to do, and that's still the case today. As far as historically, the first immigration law in the 1800s that the U.S. ever passed was the Chinese Exclusion Act, and that was specifically relating to the Chinese that were brought to the U.S. to help build the railroads for the people in the gold rush going west. And then after those railroads were built, there was a fear that the Chinese were overpopulating the country, and so Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act to deport Chinese back to China, and they instead, many of them went to Canada, which is why there's such a large Asian population, Chinese population in Canada. So from the beginning of our immigration laws, there's been a demand for foreign workers to help with the very hard jobs. And then at some point, there's often a backlash based on fear. Fear is always the underlying motive that the foreign workers that have been brought to the U.S. are going to somehow affect the native population's wages or ability to get a job, or a number of other potential reasons why they're afraid to maybe have an overpopulation of the foreign national.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. We draw them in, but then we want to kick them out.
That's
right.
We
draw them in, and then we want to kick them out. So like up until the 1930s, open border, and we needed them. But then when the Depression hit, and poverty and the Dust Bowl and all that together, all of a sudden, white people needed the jobs.
You got it.
That the undocumented people were doing. And so then we went through a season after the 1930s where we were pushing them out. But then World War II hit, and all of our workers were in war. All of a sudden after World War II, we're pulling them in again. We need them again. We're inviting them in. Then all of a sudden, we've gotten into this new era from the 80s forward.
That's right.
We're kind of like, oh, we want to push them out again.
Well, and I will say, this is what's interesting about the current political climate, is that it was actually a Republican president. It was Ronald Reagan in the 80s who passed the last major immigration reform. People call it the amnesty. And that was Reagan, who was very pro-immigrant, who allowed people to stay and gain legal status in the country. And then it was Bill Clinton in the 90s that passed a very detrimental law, AIRR, and that was a moment when a lot of the undocumented population that we have now are in the U.S., and they were no longer granted the ability to leave because of this law, because they were afraid that they would have these bars to returning that didn't exist before Bill Clinton passed this law in 96, 97. So it's interesting that it was a Republican president in the 80s that passed an amnesty, an immigration reform that people call amnesty. And then it was a Democratic president that passed a really terrible law for immigrants. And then now everything's switched. So that's why I just don't identify with political parties on this issue. And I think you just have to follow Jesus.
I second that. I second that motion. All right. So here's another quote from Heather. Between 2007 and 2017, the U.S. saw a net loss of about 2 million Mexican immigrants. In 2017, about 5 million undocumented Mexicans lived in the United States. Most of them, 83%, were long-term residents here more than 10 years. Only 8% had lived in the U.S. for less than 5 years. Increasingly, undocumented immigrants were people from around the world who overstayed legal visas, making up more than 40% of the country's undocumented population by 2024. Does that resonate with your understanding of what you've experienced in the last few years?
I began practicing immigration law in 2010 under Obama. And so when you said the 2007 to 2017 statistic, that actually tracks, because we called him the deporter-in-chief. Again, a Democratic president that deported a ton of undocumented immigrants. And over that 8-year period,
more than Trump did in his first term.
Correct. That's
Yes.
what's ironic about it.
Yes.
Is that that's again why you just can't. You got to look at statistics, right? And what Trump did in his first term was more cruel by separating children from their parents, but Obama continued a lot of those policies, including detention centers at the border, having women and children in cages. So yeah, that 2007 to 2017 statistic definitely sounds accurate, that we would have lost, especially Mexican immigrants, and they decided to go back home because there were immigrants, just like I mentioned with Luis, that were just driving to work. No criminal history got picked up, at least in the early years of Obama. Obama, later in his term, he actually created what's called a priorities memo, where he said, okay, I'm going to tell ICE now to go after the felons, the national security threats, the terrorists. Those are going to be our priorities. And then the folks that have been here for a long time, those people, we're not going to be prioritizing our limited resources on those people so we can get the really bad guys and get them out. Then things started to change, but that priorities memo was not implemented by Obama until I think 2012 maybe.
Okay. This is in 2013, Senate passed a comprehensive immigration reform measure by bipartisan vote, and the measure provided a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants and increased border security.
Correct.
So that would have been under Obama, right?
Yes. That was an Obama. Yep.
Yeah. So then it says here, by 2014, people were arriving at the U.S. border from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras.
That's right.
Where violence that approached warfare, much of it caused by gangs whose members had been socialized into gang culture in the U.S., and economic stress from that violence created refugees. These migrants were not coming over the border for economic opportunity. They were refugees applying for asylum, a legal process in the United States.
That's right. That's right. So when I first started practicing immigration law in 2010, my clients were majority Mexican. And then there was a drastic shift about the time that you were mentioning, 2013, 2014, where we started to represent and see more and more of those, what we call Northern Triangle countries, those 3 countries in Central America, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, because of the MS-13 and MS-18 gangs, the Mara Salvatrucha and the Mara Salvatrucha 18. Those 2 gangs started running the countries. They owned the governments, and they still, in large part, do have a lot of control over those 3 countries. It's the majority of our client base for the last decade, I would say, and my client base have been from those 3 Northern Triangle Central American countries, from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. And they are very much seeking asylum. They're refugees fleeing violence and persecution. They are not the economic migrants that I originally saw when I first started practicing from Mexico.
So people in a totally different situation.
You got
Lives, families, threatened, they're desperate, they're refugees, just like Jesus when he fled to Egypt.
That's right. Women and children. Earlier on we would see more Mexican men, but then it switched to everyone, including women and children, fleeing, and that was very unique.
So despite that, in 2015, Trump began campaigning, and this is when he first started saying things like, people who are pouring in over our borders have a lot of problems. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're bringing they're rapists. That's the rhetoric that he began in 2015 around his own campaign, which obviously has continued to some of the Honduras people that were up north. They're eating their cats, they're eating their dog. This kind of rhetoric of basically calling all of these people criminals of the worst sort.
That's right.
Rapists, gang members, eating cats and dogs. This has been the language around this.
Yes.
Percentage-wise, certainly, just like there's white criminals, there's also criminals in every population base, right? But
yes.
Is that accurate way to describe the people who are here undocumented through all of these reasons? Both the ones we encourage to come here for economic opportunity, but also the ones that were in desperate situations as refugees?
It's a great question. And statistically, there are lots of statistics that the listening audience can go out and search for themselves. American Immigration Council has some great stats on this, but the native-born U.S. population commits statistically significantly more crimes than both legal immigrants, so those who have a visa, and those who do not have immigration status. So undocumented immigrants commit statistically significantly less crime than the native-born U.S. population. So when I hear statistics like that, or when I hear rhetoric like that, I should say, it shows me that it is a politician trying to instill fear. And fear is a really incredible, powerful motivator to our brains. And if we believe what a politician tells us to fear, then we will then see that category of people as less than human, and we will feel less sorry for them when they are mistreated.
So evidently, MAGA has embraced a thing called the Great Replacement, a theory, the idea that immigration destroys a nation's culture and identity. Immigration destroys a nation's culture and identity. That has worked its way into the MAGA platform. Would you agree with that statement?
I'd be really interested to hear where their ancestors immigrated from.
Right?
Yeah, you can't. The U.S. is a nation of immigrants, so our nation's culture
What's
and
your
identity.
background?
I'm mostly British.
British?
Yep.
I'm English and Irish.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I mean, our nation's culture and identity would be Native American. So unless they want to deport themselves, there's really no validity to that statement whatsoever.
I would actually say the opposite. I would say the strength of our nation.
That's right.
Is our immigration.
That's right. It is.
Like,
despite the fact that our ancestors stole the Native American lands that we're on, it is our history. It is who we are. And to say that it, what was the word?
Well, it's a theory called the Great Replacement. The idea that immigration destroys a nation's culture and identity.
Right. So immigration is the nation's identity. That's who we are.
It's who we are. I mean, regardless of
how it happened, it's who we are. So,
all right. So, COVID hits. We're still kind of walking through a little bit of history. Title 42 wasn't really focused only on immigration, but it had a immigration piece to it, right?
Definitely.
And tell us how that has played out, and then the other one that I wanted you to mention was the one that you said that she could have included in here was this, I don't know how to do it, the AIRR.
I just spoke about it in the 90s.
1996.
Yeah,
okay.
I talked about it as part of that history.
Okay, that was that. Okay, cool. So what about Title 42?
So Title 42 was really difficult because it was a health-related provision where it basically closed the border during COVID. So those Northern Triangle country refugees coming up from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, fleeing persecution, were not allowed entry. And the U.S., as a general rule, the laws both in the U.S. and our international treaties with the United Nations, Convention Against Torture, requires the United States, based on our treaties with the United Nations, to allow a person seeking asylum to come into the United States and request asylum. It's part of the basis of the Immigration and Nationality Act. It's part of the basis of our laws in this country.
And I think the UN at large, right?
The
Other
High Commissioner for
countries
Refugees.
have the same, exactly.
It's the UNHCR, UN High Commissioner for Refugees. So every country who has ratified that treaty with the UNHCR has a duty and an obligation, legally, to allow people who are fleeing persecution to come in and seek asylum.
Yeah.
And our own statutes, though, beyond our treaties with the UN, our own statutes in the Immigration and Nationality Act in Section 208 require the U.S. to allow a person who is fleeing persecution to seek asylum. So it is a legal right. So a person that is entering the country to seek asylum is doing something legal. They are not entering illegally. They are doing it the legal way, as people say. But what happened with Title 42 is that no one was allowed entry for any reason on this health ground. It was extended far too long, in my opinion, under the Biden administration, the early years of the Biden administration, and then finally was lifted.
So when I was pastoring Vineyard Church, the two places that work with refugees from the UN in Kansas City, on the Kansas City, Missouri side, it's JVS, which historically was a Jewish vocational services who help relocate survivors of the Holocaust. But then it's morphed into working with refugees from the UN. The other one was Catholic Charities on the Kansas City, Kansas side. We started having volunteers work with those refugees that were being brought in through JVS primarily because we were on Kansas City, Missouri side. These were people from Iraq, Somalia, but all over the world. And like if you go to North Kansas City High School or the high schools there in Independence, Missouri, they're like international, like there's 20, 30 languages spoke at these high schools because of legal refugees coming into Kansas City.
Yes.
But this got completely shut down during COVID, right?
Yes.
And so it's now kicked back in?
No, it's been shut down
still
again.
shut down again.
It had kicked back in, and then it just got, the refugee numbers are basically zero now.
All across the United States?
Across the world. Yeah, it's except for white South Africans. White South African refugees were allowed entry. They're called Afrikaners, and Elon Musk had I guess, influenced Trump enough to sign an executive order allowing white South Africans to come to the United States as refugees, but otherwise the refugee numbers are basically zero.
Wow. So we're in a situation right now where I think now, how many undocumented people have been rounded up and detained now? Do you know any of those?
I have no idea.
Thousands.
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 That's right.
Evidently, out of the thousands of undocumented people that have been rounded up, statistics are showing that about 70% of them have no criminal record.
Correct.
And then if we actually limited that to only felonies versus misdemeanors, I'm not even sure, that those numbers might even be higher. Right?
It would be very low. It would be minuscule.
Yeah.
And based on my clients that are currently detained, none of them have any criminal history whatsoever.
Yeah. So give us, first of all, the heart of the matter. And when your heart sees the situation that people are in right now and what's going on, what's happening in these communities? Are all of these communities just living in desperate fear? Give us some heart issues, and then from the heart side of it, how can we, as America, what can I do? What can you do? You're doing stuff, but the people who aren't immigration lawyers, if we actually cared about these people, how can we? So first of all, give us the heart of what you see happening in these communities. Is it just fear running rampant?
It's terror, complete terror. They are terrified because they love their families and they don't want to be separated from their families. Shockingly, after Kenya's now fiance Luis was detained, I had her and her kids over for a boat ride on our lake. Jorge and I did, and I asked her, "Do you even want to be in the United States anymore? Like, after all you've been through, after all the government has done to you and your family?" And she said, "Well, yeah, I love America." And I'm like, oh my gosh. It's amazing to me because they love this country. They don't want to go back to the countries that they left. And as the British Somali poet says, you only leave home unless home is the mouth of a shark. And they have left the mouth of a shark, and they have come to this great nation. And they have worked hard with very little help from the government. They have pulled themselves up by the bootstraps, as our ancestors did. And they've seen how their kids can live in relative safety. And they want that. They want the American dream. They're just like our ancestors. But they are being told now that every day they should be in fear that their family might be ripped apart. And I cannot reconcile that and these actions of our government with being a person of faith. I don't see how those of us who claim to worship Jesus can also be supporting a policy that would persecute who he says that we should be advocating for.
Yes.
So it has been really, really difficult for these communities. They are terrified and they just want a path. They just want an option. I've often said, my Republican friends and family are very concerned about the national deficit. They're very concerned about the economy. And I've often said, if we want to take care of the national deficit in this country, pass immigration reform and charge undocumented immigrants $1,000 a person to apply for some kind of a work card to be able to be in this country with a status. They will pay it. They will work their tails off. They will figure out how to pay it. And then you get $1,000 or however much we decide to charge times 12 million people. And there's your national deficit gone, or at least a large portion of it. I know that we now are going to have a much bigger national deficit, but it's the only way to solve the immigration issue in the country is to expand visa numbers, pass immigration reform, give people a chance to at the American dream to have a lawful status, and it's also the best way to truly include national security in our priorities, because then we know who's here. Otherwise, we've got a whole underground population of people who are hiding, hoping not to be found by ICE, and we don't know which ones are the good ones and which ones are the bad guys. So if we let all the good ones come forward with no criminal history and apply for some kind of a work card or a status, then the ones left over, that's who we send ICE to go after. It's a much better use of our resources, and then we have a bigger workforce to help us with all of the jobs that I don't want to do.
Yeah, so one is a pathway for the people who are already here, who are undocumented, who have no criminal record. Make a pathway for them. That's one thing, right?
As part of immigration reform?
Yes. That's
one part of it.
One part of it, right? What would be the other parts? If you could wave a magic wand.
If I and I would draft it, believe me. Oh my gosh, just somebody let me draft this law. You got to increase visa numbers. So businesses are saying that that the H-1B categories, all these employment-based for our tech, we haven't had an immigration reform since the 80s. The 80s, Ronald Reagan passed it. So now we've got tech companies, we've got computers. We didn't even have computers then. So we've got tech companies saying that these visa numbers are way too low for the amount of workers that they need.
I mean, even Elon Musk was saying that, right?
Elon Musk, I never think I would agree with Elon Musk.
Right.
Here,
That one thing.
I actually agreed with him on a couple things lately. But
he was right about this big, beautiful bill.
He was right about that.
Sending it into trillions
He was
of
right
debt,
about that.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So we've got to increase visa numbers because our businesses, if we don't do that, they're sending that work overseas. They're going to start opening up overseas companies. We can keep that work in the United States if we increase the amount of tech visas.
It's the same reason why manufacturing went out of our country.
Exactly.
It's the same.
It's a
exact
very
same
simple
thing.
solution.
Yeah.
Deporting people and closing the borders or doing whatever Donald Trump is doing right now is not the solution to the problem. It will not solve the problem because, again, people don't leave home unless home is the mouth of a shark. So even though what is happening right now is terrible, what is happening in their country is worse. And they will keep coming as long as that situation in their home country is what it is. So we can either send more money in development to their countries to help stabilize those countries so their governments are more stable. But if we end USAID and all the programs that help, then that's likely not going to happen. And we're going to have continued numbers coming in. So it's really a multifaceted approach. It's stabilizing the governments of the countries if we don't want people flowing in. And number two, it is dealing with the population inside of the United States by increasing visa numbers and creating an immigration reform program that actually applies to today's demand. We have to increase all of the visa categories that haven't been increased since the 80s.
Oh, anything else? If you could wave a magic wand?
I'm excited about the Dignity Act. It's a bipartisan law that's currently working its way. It's a bill that's working its way through Congress right now, and it is, again, bipartisan. I have even heard from some Republicans recently that they're excited about it, some pretty conservative Republicans. So I invite the audience to look into the Dignity Act and to call your members of Congress, because I do think that we need both, obviously, sides of the aisle working together to make this happen.
The bipartisan bill that Mike Johnson introduced before Trump was elected, and it was actually seemed like it was going to get some traction.
Yes, it did.
And then Trump squashed it.
Ironically, Marco Rubio was in support of that one.
Yeah.
Jeff Sessions was in support of that, and then they all flip-flopped.
When Trump
told him to.
Told him to. But do you think that bipartisan bill would have been good?
Yes, and that's what the Dignity Act is.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
So it's similar provisions.
It's the resurrection.
Yeah, that's
of that
right,
one.
and with some tweaks for today's economy. Because every year that we don't pass immigration reform, and every year that our economy grows, you have to edit the language of the bill to include what the current demand is for those visas. Okay. Because every visa category has a certain limited number of visas in that category, and so the tech industry in particular, the STEM professions, are begging Congress to pass immigration reform so that they can actually get the workers that they need here.
Yeah. Some of the worst things I'm hearing, like the Kilmar Abrego Garcia incident. Mm-hmm. I was just at the Disciples of Christ General Assembly. It's our nationwide assembly of disciple pastors. One of our pastors, Reverend Lopez, pastors a Latino congregation in L.A. ICE agents showed up with assault rifles in her church parking lot and actually pointed an assault rifle. It's a news story, and she was at we just were in Memphis 2 weeks ago, and she was there. This was in a church with ICE agents, unidentified but in mask, with assault rifles showing up and pointed a semi-automatic gun at her, automatic gun at her, like at her. She's the pastor.
Oh my goodness.
The guy that was arrested who had 3 sons in the Marines. Have you this story of one of the undocumented guys that's picked up by ICE has 2 sons in the Marines. He has no criminal record. 3 sons born here who are citizens. All 3 served in the Marines. 1's out of the Marines and 2 are currently actively serving in the Marines. He's been now detained. Okay, and then we're now building new prison systems. So the prison system in America largely has incarcerated blacks and Latinos for marijuana charges at an unprecedented rate over white people. Mm-hmm. So there's some discrimination going on in our current prison system. Now we're going to all of a sudden start building new prisons to detain all of these people that ICE is now picking up off the streets.
Yes.
What do you think about new prison systems just for immigrants?
It happened under, as we call it, Trump 1.0, and those detention centers continued under Obama. Now there's a new one, Alligator Alcatraz is what they're calling it, in Florida and the Everglades. And the cynical part of me says, well, if you want to own stock, buy Core Civic stock, because it's going to go. It already went through the roof.
It's
actually on the day he was elected, it skyrocketed.
Yeah, prison systems have become a multi-billion-dollar industry.
That's right.
Even apart from these new ones.
These are private prisons that have contracts with the Department of Homeland Security, and they are huge money for the prison industry, for those private prisons. I actually had a legal assistant's brother who died in one, and he ended up hanging himself because he had a mental health condition that he was asking for his medication. They would not give him his medication, instead put him in solitary confinement, and he hung himself. So that's the kind of treatment that immigrants get in these private prison systems. And Core Civic and others like it are going to make tons of money off of this. And I would just rather see my taxpayer dollars used to find a way to fix the problem, as opposed to putting a Band-Aid on the problem, which is these private prisons. Instead of persecuting people further who have already suffered so much, why don't we actually fix the problem and pass comprehensive immigration reform so our money can be used to really prioritize who should be prioritized for removal, which are people that have serious criminal
issues. Are a danger to society.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All of us want people off the streets.
All of us want that.
Who are a danger to society.
Exactly.
Yes.
And these people, this pastor and the father of the Marines, those are not the people that any of us, I don't think, any reasonable human wants our taxpayer dollars going toward imprisoning.
Incarcerating a guy like that, right?
I have 2 clients right now. One is a mother of 3 U.S. citizen children. The 5-year-old has autism. The 5-year-old daughter has autism so severely that she still wears a diaper. That client has been in detention for over a month now. She was detained by ICE We're currently fighting her case in court. They will not release her. So our taxpayer dollars are going to that. I'm not happy about that. I don't want to pay taxes for that. I want my taxes to go to make us safer for our roads, our schools, things they should be going for, not to detain people who are not a threat to our community.
Yeah. Wow. So think about this. In the sheep and the goat story that Jesus told,
Yep.
you know, when you've done it to the least of these, you've done it unto me. We meet Jesus when we minister, when we love, when we care for, when we befriend the most vulnerable. Two specific things that Jesus names in that parable are, it's translated many times the stranger, which is immigrant, refugee, and the prisoner. So two of the people that Jesus selected that we're supposed to care for and love, we are now rounding up immigrants and putting them in prison. Why? So that us Christians can now go visit them? Do you see the irony of what I'm trying to? I'm drawing this to a conclusion right now, but
Yeah, it's
for those who follow Jesus, this seems to be the opposite to me.
I have a really hard time with the people that have crosses around their necks advocating for this, because I don't know what Bible they're reading.
Yeah.
But we're reading a different Bible.
Yeah. I feel the same way. It's
There's no biblical support.
I just
for it.
don't. I can't get my head around it.
There's no biblical support. The only argument for it is fear, and there's no biblical support for fear.
Yeah.
So there's no biblical support for any of it.
Yeah. And I think the only other thing that you hear is that people do, like we said, want dangerous people off the streets. So there is that wing that if that's all you talked about was just getting the dangerous criminals off the street, I know most of my people would want that, right? We don't
Sure.
want to endanger people. We don't want more mass shooters like we just saw yesterday in New York.
No, we don't. I don't.
So
But these people are not that.
they're not. So, and a large majority aren't.
That's right.
And that's what the statistics hold up. So, yeah. Well, thank you, Andrea, for being on here. Is there any concluding comments that you'd like to make to our audience? How can they get involved? How can they help? What would you recommend for us people who aren't immigration lawyers? How can we?
Yeah, it's a great
help?
question. There are some
care?
wonderful
How can we-
organizations. If you're in Kansas City, there's an organization that I love called AIRR, AIRR, and it's Advocates for Immigrants' Rights and Reconciliation. They're doing excellent work with Know Your Rights presentations, and so you can volunteer for AIRR. They also have accompaniment programs. So like we immigration lawyers are absolutely slammed right now, and we don't have time to go to every client's ICE check-in, for example, but our clients are terrified. So having a person with immigration status accompany them to their ICE check-in means the world to people. And a lot of times they can request that a U.S. citizen accompany them to their ICE check-in. Or even if you see an ICE raid or arrest on the street, pull out your camera and start recording. Make sure that you've got footage. That was really important in my lawsuit against ICE because after we sued them, and I was in litigation for 5 years against the U.S. government, they lied about everything. Thankfully, we had both video footage and audio footage of exactly what they had done. So ultimately, the lies didn't hold up and they settled. So you need to pull out your camera, your phone, and start recording what they're doing so that there is evidence of what they've done.
Wow. All right. It's a big issue.
It is.
Thank you for being here to talk about it. And I'm with you and I'm praying. And thanks for mentioning this word AIRR.
AIR.
Okay. I want to follow up on that.
Yes.
And is there some organization that helps coordinate people who would be willing to go stand with people?
That would be AIR.
Is that AIR?
Yep.
Okay.
So AIR is
Okay.
I would say AIR is one of the best organizations right now in the Kansas City area.
Okay.
My colleague Angela Ferguson is on the board, and it's a lot of Christians. It's really neat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Love what you're doing. Tell your family I said hello.
Will do.
And thanks, everybody, for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures for this episode, and see you next time. Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for listening all the way through on this episode. By the way, if you're not already a supporter, go to spiritualityadventures.com, sign up for one of our monthly supports, and you will receive our bonus content. You'll receive lots of interesting information about our guests. Many of our musicians will do special bonus songs and record a song. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe. Be sure and share any of the episodes that you like. And be sure and make comments if you like them as well. This helps us get Spirituality Adventures out there to more listeners, more watchers. So whatever platform you're using, subscribe, like, share, make comments, and go to our website, sign up for our team, and be a part of the team support. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.